The streets were busy that afternoon, filled with the noise of people walking, cars honking, and the occasional laughter of children playing. Among all this, in a small corner of the city, there was an old music school. The paint on the walls was chipped, and the windows were dusty, but inside, the sound of music could be heard if you listened closely. A young boy sat at a worn piano, his fingers moving slowly over the keys. He didn't play loudly, but every note carried a kind of raw feeling that made the room seem quieter somehow. He had been practicing for hours, though he didn't know if anyone would ever notice. Music was his escape. At home, life was tough. There wasn't much money, and sometimes meals were small. But when he played, it felt like the world paused for him. Each note he pressed told a story of hope, struggle, and dreams he didn't even know how to speak aloud. Outside the music school, a car pulled up. A man stepped out, dressed in clothes that shined even under the sun. He looked around the street, clearly not used to places like this. His presence made people stop and stare for a moment before returning to their lives. The man walked toward the music school, his face set in a serious expression, but there was a spark of curiosity in his eyes. He had heard rumors about young talents hiding in small corners, and he was determined to see for himself. As he reached the entrance, the boy's soft notes reached his ears. He stopped and listened. There was something different about the sound. It wasn't perfect, not technically flawless, but it had heart. Something inside him stirred. He pushed open the door and stepped inside, and the boy froze when he saw him. The room suddenly felt smaller, and the weight of the stranger's gaze made his hands shake. "Hello there," the man said, his voice loud enough to fill the room but kind in its own way. "I'm looking for someone who can play from the heart. Can you show me what you have?" The boy nodded, unsure if he could even meet such a request. His fingers hovered over the keys, feeling the smooth and worn surface beneath them. He tried to calm his nerves, remembering that music had always been honest with him. The man looked around the room, noticing the faded posters on the walls, the old chairs, and the small windows letting in a thin line of sunlight. He walked closer to the piano, kneeling slightly to watch the boy's hands. "Play something for me. Just one note is enough if it speaks," he said, almost whispering, but with an intensity that made the boy's heart beat faster. The boy took a deep breath. He pressed a key gently. The note rang out, and immediately, the man's face softened. There was something in that sound that went beyond skill or training. It was a note that carried life, emotion, and a kind of honesty that could not be taught. The boy pressed a few more notes, building a melody that was simple but full of feeling. As the boy played, he forgot about the man, about the crowd that was now gathering quietly at the back of the room, watching. He only knew the music, letting it flow through him, telling the story of his life. The late nights practicing, the small victories, and the dreams he held close. Each note seemed to carry more weight than the last, and he didn't even realize he was smiling now, feeling free in a way he hadn't felt in a long time. The man's eyes glistened with moisture. He had seen talent before, people who could play beautifully, but this was different. This was someone who played with a soul. He leaned back slightly, trying to hide his reaction, but it was impossible. The room was silent except for the boy's music, and it felt like even time had paused to listen. "Stop," the man finally said, and the boy's hands froze in midair. The silence that followed was heavy but not uncomfortable. The man looked at him and said, "If you can do that with just one note, I want you to know something. I will take you in, give you the chance to learn, and help you become everything you can be. But I need to hear it from you. You have to decide if you want this." The boy stared, unsure if he had heard correctly. Was this a joke? Did someone really notice him? He looked down at the piano keys, then back at the man. His mind raced. The life he knew was hard, filled with challenges and responsibilities. But this offer, it was more than he had ever imagined. Something in the man's eyes told him it was real. The boy swallowed hard and nodded slowly. "I'll try," he whispered. The man smiled, a mix of relief and excitement crossing his face. "Good. Play for me again. Show me what you really feel." The boy took another deep breath. This time, it wasn't about showing anyone his skills. It was about letting the music speak for him. He pressed the first key again, and the note echoed through the room, carrying with it all of his hopes and fears. People around them stayed silent, moved by the moment. The boy played with a new confidence, feeling the warmth of possibility for the first time. The man listened carefully, understanding that this was more than talent. It was heart, it was life, it was a story waiting to be told. When the boy finished, the room was quiet again, but it was filled with something unspoken. The man wiped a tear from his eye, still trying to maintain his composed exterior. He stood up and reached out a hand to the boy. "Welcome," he said simply. And in that moment, the boy felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He knew things were about to change, and while he didn't know exactly what the future held, he was ready to face it. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the city. People on the streets continued their lives, unaware that in a small, dusty music school, a boy's life had just shifted forever. For the first time, he felt seen. For the first time, he felt hope. And it all started with one note, played with everything he had inside. After that first note, the boy could hardly believe what had just happened. The millionaire had promised to take him in, and yet it felt unreal. His mind raced with questions, fears, and excitement all at once. He looked around the small music room, noticing the cracked walls, the dust on the shelves, and the faded posters of famous musicians. This room had been his whole world, and now it seemed a new world was opening for him. Word spread quickly among the people in the music school. Students who had been practicing in other rooms began to peek inside, whispering to each other about the mysterious man and the boy who had impressed him with just one note. Even the teachers came to watch, curious and a little skeptical. They had seen many talented children over the years, but there was something about this boy that was different. He played not just with skill, but with a depth of feeling that could make anyone stop and listen. The millionaire, meanwhile, was pacing slowly in the room, thinking about the boy. He had traveled all over the world searching for talent, but he rarely saw something so genuine. This was not just a student who could play notes perfectly. This was someone who could make people feel. He could see it in the boy's eyes, in the way his fingers hesitated just before pressing a key, as if the boy was pouring a part of himself into every sound. The boy's hands were still trembling, though he tried to steady them. He had never been in a room like this with such an important person watching him. He thought about his life at home, the long nights when he had no electricity, the small meals, the times he had almost given up on music because it seemed impossible to get anywhere. And yet, here was a chance he could never have imagined. It was frightening but also thrilling. The millionaire finally stopped pacing and knelt down to the boy's level, speaking softly. "I know this is sudden, and it may seem overwhelming, but I believe in you. You have something rare. If you are willing, I want to help you grow your talent and give you opportunities you could never reach on your own." The boy listened carefully. The words were simple, but they carried a weight he could feel deep inside. This was not just a promise of lessons or money, it was a promise of belief, of trust, of someone seeing him for who he truly was. The boy nodded slowly. "I want to try," he said, his voice quiet but determined. The millionaire smiled, a mix of pride and relief crossing his face. He had made many deals and investments in his life, but this was different. This was personal. This was about nurturing someone's heart as well as their talent. In the following days, preparations began. The boy had to leave his familiar surroundings, and even though he was excited, he couldn't help but feel anxious. The streets he had walked every day, the small shops, the friends who played music alongside him, all of it felt like a part of him that he was leaving behind. His family was supportive but worried. They understood the opportunity, yet they knew the challenges that came with a life so different from their own. The millionaire made sure everything was ready. The boy would have access to the best instruments, teachers, and resources. But beyond that, he wanted to teach him about life, discipline, and resilience. He wanted the boy to understand that talent alone was not enough. It was the heart and persistence that would carry him forward. On the boy's first day in this new life, He walked into a large building filled with sunlight streaming through tall windows. The rooms were filled with pianos, each one polished and perfect. There were other children, some already advanced in their skills, and the boy felt a twinge of nervousness. He wondered if he would fit in, if he could measure up to them. But then he remembered the note he had played for the millionaire. That note had come from his heart. If he could play like that again, maybe he could find his place here too. The first lessons were challenging. The boy was pushed harder than he had ever been. The teachers were demanding, expecting precision and technique, but they also encouraged emotion and personal expression. At first, he struggled. His fingers were not used to some of the exercises, and he often made mistakes. But the millionaire was patient, reminding him that every mistake was a chance to learn, every note a step closer to becoming the musician he could be. During breaks, the boy explored the new environment. He saw other children practicing, some with perfect technique, some with the same raw emotion he had. He realized that talent came in many forms, and that everyone had their own story. It made him feel less alone, less like he had to compete and more like he could grow alongside others who shared his passion. Evenings were often the hardest. He missed his family, the familiar sounds of his neighborhood, and the comfort of the old piano at the small music school. But he also found moments of joy. Sometimes he would sit at the grand piano in the main hall, playing quietly to himself, experimenting with melodies that came from his memories and feelings. The millionaire would occasionally listen from a distance, silently acknowledging the progress the boy was making. One afternoon, after a particularly long session, the boy sat down on a bench outside the building. He watched the city below, thinking about how far he had come in such a short time. He remembered the first note he had ever played for the millionaire, and how it had changed everything. That single note had opened doors, created hope, and shown him that people could believe in him, even when he was unsure himself. He felt a mix of gratitude and determination. He didn't want to waste this chance. The millionaire approached him, noticing the thoughtful expression on the boy's face. "You're doing well," he said simply. "I can see your heart in the music you play. Remember, talent is just the start. How you feel, how you express yourself, that is what will touch people. Never forget that." The boy nodded, understanding that this journey was not just about learning music, but about discovering who he was and what he could give to the world. As the days turned into weeks, the boy's confidence grew. He began to see improvements not just in his skills, but in his understanding of music and life. He was learning to listen not just to the notes, but to the feelings behind them. He was learning patience, resilience, and the value of hard work. The millionaire continued to guide him, sharing stories from his own life, teaching lessons that went beyond music, showing him that success was a combination of talent, effort, and heart. Word about the boy's talent began to spread beyond the music school. People who had attended his small performances started talking about him, and soon, invitations to showcase his music in larger venues began to arrive. The boy felt a sense of pride, but also a deep responsibility. He wanted to honor the chance he had been given, to make the people who believed in him proud, and to show that music could carry stories and emotions that words alone could not. Every evening, when he returned to his room, the boy would take a moment to reflect. He thought about the streets he had left behind, the challenges he had faced, and the dream that had brought him here. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that he had already overcome so much. And with each note he played, he reminded himself that he had the strength to continue, to grow, and to become the musician he was meant to be. The millionaire watched all of this unfold with quiet pride. He had seen many talented children, but the boy's journey was different. It wasn't just about skill or fame. It was about heart, courage, and the willingness to embrace a new life despite fear. The man knew that the boy's first note had been the start, but the journey ahead would be the real test. And he was confident that the boy was ready to face it, one note at a time. The boy had been practicing all morning, his hands moving faster now, more confident than before. He had learned so much in the last few weeks, how to control his fingers, how to feel each note, and most importantly, how to let the music carry his emotions. Today, however, felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a quiet tension that made his heart beat a little faster. He sat at the grand piano in the main hall, the sunlight streaming through the tall windows illuminating the polished surface. The room was silent, except for the faint hum of the city outside. Today was not just another lesson. Today he was going to play for the Millionaire again. But this time it was not about learning new techniques or impressing teachers. It was about showing everything he had inside, the journey of his life expressed through music. The Millionaire entered quietly, watching from a distance. He had been guiding the boy since the day they met, but today he wanted to see the transformation for himself. The first note the boy had ever played had moved him deeply, but now he was curious to see how much the boy had grown. The boy took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment. Memories of his past rushed through him, the long hours practicing on a broken piano, the nights without electricity, the meals that were sometimes smaller than they should have been. And yet, all of those struggles had brought him here. All of that hardship had shaped the music he was about to play. He pressed the first key, and the sound filled the room. This note was different from the one he had played for the Millionaire weeks ago. It was richer, stronger, and more deliberate. It carried the weight of his experiences, the sadness, the hope, and the determination that had grown inside him. Each note that followed built upon the last, weaving a melody that was simple but powerful. It told a story of a boy who had faced challenges, yet refused to give up, who had found joy in music even when life seemed harsh. As he played, the Millionaire's eyes filled with tears. He could feel the depth of the boy's journey through the music. He understood more than ever that talent was not only about skill. It was about the heart behind it, the emotion, and the story that could be felt even without words. The boy's first note had been a spark, but this performance was a flame, illuminating the truth of his soul. The boy was lost in the music. He did not notice the teachers standing quietly at the edges of the room, nor the few students who had gathered to watch. He was not playing for anyone but himself, for the voice inside that had always spoken through the piano. Every press of a key was a word, every pause a breath in a conversation he had longed to have with the world. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment. The notes hung in the air, echoing slightly against the high ceilings. The boy lowered his hands slowly, unsure of how to break the quiet. He looked at the Millionaire, who remained seated, tears glistening in his eyes, his expression a mixture of awe and pride. Finally, the Millionaire stood and approached him. "That was remarkable," he said, his voice steady but full of emotion. "You have grown so much. Every note told a story, and I could feel it. You are not just a talented musician. You are someone who has lived, who has felt, and who can make others feel too. That is rare." The boy felt a shiver run down his spine. Praise had never felt like this before. It was not about approval or grades, it was about being truly seen. The boy swallowed hard, trying to find words, but none came. Instead, he nodded, letting the music itself speak. He realized in that moment that music was more than a hobby or a skill. It was a language, a bridge between people, and a way to show the truth of one's heart. He wanted to continue to grow, to explore what he could do, and to share it with the world. The Millionaire smiled and guided him to a nearby bench. "You have potential beyond what you know," he said. "But potential alone is not enough. It must be nurtured, practiced, and shared. That is why I brought you here. I want to help you become the musician and the person you were meant to be. But remember, the journey will not always be easy. There will be challenges, and sometimes you may doubt yourself. When that happens, remember the first note you played for me. Remember how it felt to be truly heard." The boy nodded, feeling a quiet determination settle inside him. Over the next few hours, the boy continued to play, experimenting with different melodies and rhythms. He tried pieces that were new to him, some difficult, some simple. Each time he made a mistake, the Millionaire would gently correct him, offering advice not just about the notes, but about expression, timing, and emotion. The boy began to understand that music was not just about hitting the right keys. It was about conveying a feeling, making people listen with their hearts. By the evening, the boy felt exhausted but fulfilled. He had learned so much, not just about music, but about himself. He realized that every note he played carried a part of his life, and that sharing it with others could create connections he had never imagined. He felt a sense of purpose, a reason to continue pushing forward, and a desire to honor the opportunity he had been given. The millionaire watched him quietly, noticing the changes that had taken place. The boy was more confident, more expressive, and more aware of the power of his own story. He had seen the spark in the boy's first note, and now he was witnessing the flame growing stronger. The man understood that this was only the beginning. The boy had the potential to inspire others, to touch hearts, and to show the world that talent combined with perseverance and emotion could create something extraordinary. That night, as the boy lay in his small room provided by the millionaire, he thought about the journey ahead. He knew there would be difficult days, moments of doubt, and challenges he could not yet imagine. But he also knew that he had already come so far, and that he had the guidance, support, and determination to continue. He held on to the memory of the first note he had played, the sound that had changed everything, and used it as a source of strength. Sleep came slowly, filled with dreams of music, performance, and the possibilities of the future. The boy felt a quiet confidence, a belief in himself that he had never known before. He knew that the journey would not always be easy, but he also knew that he had found something precious, a way to express himself, to be heard, and to make a difference through music. The next morning, he woke with renewed determination. He returned to the grand piano, eager to continue learning, to explore new melodies, and to push the boundaries of what he thought possible. The millionaire greeted him with a smile, acknowledging the boy's growth and encouraging him to keep going. Together, they would continue the journey, one note at a time. Each key pressed a step closer to a future filled with possibility, emotion, and music that could touch the hearts of many. Weeks had passed since the boy had first met the millionaire, and his life had begun to change in ways he could hardly have imagined. Each day brought new lessons, new challenges, and new moments that tested both his patience and his courage. But it was also a time of discovery about music, about the world, and about himself. The boy had grown more confident in his skills. His fingers moved effortlessly across the keys, and he could feel the emotion behind every note. The melodies he played were no longer just exercises. They were stories of his journey, of the struggles he had overcome, and the hope he carried for the future. Each note he played now had a purpose, a meaning, a message. One afternoon, the millionaire invited the boy to a small gathering. A few teachers and musicians had been invited to hear him play, though the room was modest, not a grand concert hall. The boy felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. This was the first time he would perform for a small audience outside his lessons. He wanted to make them feel the same emotions he felt when he played, to show them not just his skill, but his heart. As he entered the room, he noticed the curious eyes watching him. Some of the musicians nodded politely, while others whispered quietly to one another. The boy felt a moment of doubt, wondering if he could live up to the expectation. But then he remembered the first note he had played for the millionaire, the note that had changed everything. That memory gave him strength. He sat at the piano and took a deep breath. The room fell silent. All that could be heard was the faint rustle of clothing and the soft tapping of fingers on knees. Then he pressed the first key, and the note rang out clearly. It was not just a sound, but a statement. It carried the journey of the boy's life, the hardships he had faced, and the resilience he had built. Each note that followed painted a picture, telling a story words could not capture. The listeners were captivated. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them. Others leaned forward, their faces reflecting awe and emotion. The boy's playing was more than technical skill. It was sincerity. It was honesty. It was life itself poured through the piano keys. The millionaire watched quietly, pride swelling in his chest. This was what he had hoped for, not perfection but truth. When the boy finished, the room was silent for a heartbeat, and then a soft applause began, growing steadily until everyone was clapping. The boy looked up, surprised and a little embarrassed by the attention. He felt warmth in his chest, a sense of accomplishment, and a deep gratitude for the chance he had been given. The millionaire approached him, smiling. "That was extraordinary," he said, his voice full of emotion. "You have something very special. Not just talent, but the ability to move people. That is rare. Remember, this is just the beginning. There are many opportunities ahead, and I want to help you embrace them all." The boy nodded, feeling a new sense of determination. He knew that the road ahead would not always be easy, but he also knew that he had the support, guidance, and inner strength to continue. Over the following weeks, the boy's schedule became more demanding. He had private lessons, practice sessions, and small performances. The millionaire introduced him to other musicians, some famous, some unknown, who shared their experiences and advice. The boy listened carefully, absorbing every word, every technique, every piece of wisdom. He realized that becoming a great musician was not just about playing notes. It was about understanding music, life, and the emotions that connected them. One evening, after a particularly long day of practice, the boy sat outside, watching the sunset. The city below was alive with lights and movement, but he felt a quiet stillness inside. He thought about the journey he had taken, from a small music school to this world of opportunity. He remembered the faces of his family and friends, their pride and their worries. He realized that everything he had achieved so far was not just for himself, but for them as well. The millionaire joined him quietly, sitting on the bench beside him. He looked at the boy and said, "You have come a long way, but remember, the most important part of this journey is not just what you can do with your hands, but what you can do with your heart. Music is a language that speaks to people in ways words cannot. Never forget the power you have to inspire and connect through it." The boy nodded, feeling the weight of those words and the responsibility they carried. As days turned into weeks, the boy continued to grow. He learned to compose, to experiment with different styles, and to express himself more freely. He was no longer just a student. He was becoming an artist, someone who could touch hearts and tell stories through music. The millionaire remained a constant presence, guiding him, encouraging him, and sometimes simply listening as the boy played. The boy also began to understand the value of perseverance and patience. Not every piece he played came out perfectly. Not every performance went smoothly. There were moments of frustration, when his fingers stumbled or when a melody did not sound the way he imagined. But with each challenge, he learned to try again, to listen more carefully, and to grow from the experience. The millionaire reminded him often that mistakes were part of learning, and that true talent was not just about success, but about resilience and heart. One day, the millionaire made an announcement. He had arranged for the boy to perform at a larger event, one that would be attended by people who could help him advance further in his musical career. The boy felt a surge of excitement, but also nervousness. This was a bigger stage, more eyes, and more expectations. But he also felt ready. He had worked hard, learned so much, and discovered the depth of his own passion. He knew he could face this challenge. On the day of the performance, the boy arrived early, taking in the grandeur of the venue. The lights, the stage, and the audience waiting all seemed overwhelming at first. But then he remembered the first note he had played for the millionaire, the moment when his life had begun to change. That memory gave him courage. He sat at the piano, took a deep breath, and let his fingers move. The music filled the hall, rich and vibrant, carrying the story of his journey. Each note was deliberate, each pause meaningful. The audience was captivated, some leaning forward, some closing their eyes, all feeling the emotion behind the music. The boy played not just to impress, but to communicate, to share his heart with the world. When he finished, the hall erupted in applause. The boy felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had faced his fears, shared his story, and been heard. The millionaire came forward, his face glowing with pride. "You have done well," he said. "This is just the beginning. Never stop believing in yourself, and never stop sharing your music with the world." The boy nodded, feeling a deep sense of purpose and gratitude. That night, as he returned to his room, he reflected on how far he had come. From a small corner of a music school to performing on a larger stage, he had grown not just as a musician but as a person. He realized that every challenge, every lesson, every note he had played was a step in his journey. And he knew that the future held even greater possibilities, as long as he continued to play with heart and determination. Months had passed since the boy first met the millionaire, and life had transformed in ways he could hardly have imagined. He had grown not just as a musician but as a person. His confidence had soared, and he had learned to carry his emotions through every note he played. The lessons, the performances, and the challenges had all shaped him into someone who understood that music was more than sound. It was a language of the heart. One bright morning, the millionaire approached the boy with a broad smile. "Today is special," he said. "You are going to perform at a concert where people from all over the city, and even some from other countries, will be watching. This is your chance to show how far you've come and to inspire others with your music." The boy felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. This would be his biggest audience yet. He had worked hard to reach this moment, but the thought of so many eyes on him made his heart race. They arrived at the venue, a grand hall filled with people, the lights bright and the air buzzing with anticipation. The boy's hands trembled slightly as he approached the piano. He took a deep breath, remembering all the lessons he had learned and the support he had received. Most importantly, he remembered the first note he had ever played for the millionaire, the note that had changed everything. That memory gave him courage and focus. As he sat at the piano, the audience grew quiet, waiting for the music to begin. The boy pressed the first key, and the sound carried through the hall. It was strong and clear, full of emotion and life. Each note he played built upon the last, telling a story that words could not capture. The music reflected his journey, the struggles, the victories, the dreams he had held close, and the hope for the future. The audience was captivated. Some closed their eyes, feeling the music as if it were speaking directly to them. Others leaned forward, listening intently, moved by the honesty and depth of the performance. The boy was no longer nervous. He was fully immersed in the music, allowing it to flow naturally from his heart through his fingers. The millionaire watched from the side, tears glistening in his eyes. He knew he had discovered something rare, a talent that went beyond skill, a soul that could move people with truth and emotion. He saw the boy's growth, the confidence, the strength, and the depth that had developed over months of learning and practice. He realized that the boy was no longer just a student. He was an artist, ready to share his gift with the world. When the boy finished, the hall remained silent for a moment, then erupted into applause. People stood, clapping and cheering, some even calling out words of admiration. The boy looked up, overwhelmed, feeling warmth and pride. He had done it. He had shared his music with a larger audience, and they had felt every note, every emotion, every part of his journey. The millionaire approached him once more. "You have come a long way," he said softly. "Your music has the power to inspire and touch hearts. Never forget that. This is just the beginning. There is so much more for you to discover and share." The boy nodded, feeling gratitude and determination. He knew that he had worked hard, but it was the guidance, belief, and support he had received that had made this possible. In the following weeks, the boy continued to perform at different events, each time reaching more people and inspiring them with his music. He became a symbol of hope and perseverance, showing that talent combined with heart and effort could overcome obstacles and touch the lives of many. People from his neighborhood, his family, and friends followed his journey, proud of what he had achieved and encouraged by the story of his success. The boy also made sure to give back. He returned to the music school where he had first started, sharing his experiences with younger students. He encouraged them to practice, to believe in themselves, and to find their own voice through music. He understood that talent alone was not enough. It was the willingness to work, to feel, and to share that made the difference. The millionaire continued to mentor him, not only in music but in life. He taught him about responsibility, resilience, and the importance of helping others along the way. The boy learned that success was not just about personal achievement, but about inspiring and lifting those around him. He realized that his journey had come full circle, from a boy playing a worn piano in a small music school to someone who could inspire a new generation. One evening, after a long day of practice, the boy sat at the grand piano, playing a melody he had composed himself. Each note carried the story of his journey, the challenges, the triumphs, and the dreams he had yet to fulfill. He smiled, remembering the first note that had changed everything. It was a simple sound, but it had opened doors, created hope, and shown him the path he was meant to follow. The millionaire watched quietly from the doorway, a proud smile on his face. He understood that the boy had grown beyond his expectations. He had become not just a talented musician, but a young man with heart, courage, and vision. The music in the room was more than sound. It was life, passion, and the spirit of someone who had refused to give up despite the odds. As the night fell, the boy closed the piano and looked out at the city lights. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. The struggles, the lessons, the people who had believed in him, and the music that had always been his companion. He knew that the future held more challenges, more stages, and more opportunities to share his gift. But he also knew that he was ready, that he had the strength, the heart, and the courage to face whatever came next. The boy's story spread beyond the city. People shared his journey, inspired by the transformation from a small music school to grand performances. He became a symbol of hope for many children who faced hardships, showing that talent, perseverance, and heart could create change. He continued to practice, to perform, and to inspire, carrying with him the lessons he had learned and the first note that had started it all. And so, the boy played, each note a testament to his journey, each melody a story of hope, and each performance a gift to the world. The first note he ever played for the millionaire remained in his heart, a reminder that dreams could be realized, that challenges could be overcome, and that music had the power to transform lives. With every key he pressed, he knew that his journey had only just begun, and the world was ready to listen.